So, we're here to talk about the standard. So, what is the standard? What do you know about the standard?
The standard of what?
Have you heard that term before?
Well, the standard is like the marker of something.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, I'm the gold standard here, or this is what is to be at this level. You get up to here, or like standardized testing. This is going to show what you know about something. It's
Yeah.
also like the expectation for
Yep.
what needs to be done or where you should be with something.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different contexts for the standard. So the standard could be any of those, right? And now I try to look for the history of where that term came from, because I've heard that term in CrossFit, and I've also heard that term outside of CrossFit. And the term of standard comes from, I think it's the French Army. Like historically, like the standard was a military flag that they used, and it was meant to be like something that they rallied under, and it also was something that signaled excellence, right? And so like the last part is the part that we're most concerned about, because excellence is a big part of CrossFit, right? And in particular, when CrossFit talks about the standard, we're talking about movement standards, right? And so when we look at movement standards, what does that mean? What is a movement standard?
This is the expectation, or this is the standard of how to do it. This is the way it is done.
Yeah.
Here's the visualization.
Yeah.
We want to match that.
Totally. Now, why do we have a movement standard when people move so differently?
To alleviate any confusion.
That's a big one, yeah.
To have a goal to get to something. And also that for something to be taught the same way. So there's continuity.
Yep, that's good. And yeah, I mean, you can't have clarity without continuity. You can't have a goal if you don't know where you're going, right? So those are good. Any other reasons?
To improve performance, obviously.
Yeah, and how specifically? How does having a standard improve performance? That's a good one. That's the one I was looking for.
So, like if you're trying out for a sports team, the standard to be a part of this team is to, at least shoot 85% from the free throw line. So, all right, if you want to make the team, this is where you got to be to be able to make the team. So,
okay.
So you practice harder and you work harder, or as hard as you can, to get to that level, so you could get to that ultimate goal. So you get better via repetition, via practice.
I'll take that. So there's like a minimum requirement, right? That's the standard. If you don't meet the standard, you don't fit. That's good. I like that. How else does a standard or the standard impact performance?
If you have a standard in place, it should, in theory, prevent injury.
Yeah, maybe. It's funny. So that one, it's like, that's one of the ones you'll find is common for why CrossFit has movement standards. These keep us safe, right? This is why we do this. It's for safety, lack of injury, yada, yada, yada. Yes and no. So it is true that like, that is a reason. I will say this. I'll give you that. That is a reason that like CrossFit says is when you move poorly and you're not moving to the standard, you may not be training what we want you to train that day. And then a great example of that is when we're doing a hip hinge movement, like a deadlift, and really it's not even a beginning athlete, it could be an advanced athlete who's just moved really poorly for years, and instead of doing a hip hinge and keeping their posterior chain engaged, they are squatting and losing tension, right? And so that is an example of like they might be squatting their hip hinge they're doing like a kettlebell goblet squat, but their squat's down here, or the weight's down there. And so they're working the same muscles. And so let's say there's a day where I programmed 150 partner wall balls where you do have to squat every time, and that's 150 reps. And the next day there's 150 kettlebell deadlifts, and they're squatting. And the intention was for them to work the back side of their legs, then they're double working the front side. So that is a reason, right? And that can lead to overtraining. Now, the reason I kind of I'm skeptical about that one a little bit, that part is true. You can lead to overtraining, training the wrong things unintentionally, but movement looks different for a lot of people. So for a lot of people, their form, like there's people out there taking fitness classes where no one is coaching them on their form. That's very common. And they might do that for years and never experience injury because their body gets used to that, or they don't hit a load that's big enough to break them, so to speak, right? Now, another reason that's important for performance is what do we do at the end of class every time?
Cool down. I mean, well, not everyone does though, but it's.
What about this?
Okay, so for performance, we denote the performance.
We write down the score, right?
Unless somebody, just says my face, obviously, but yeah, we write down a score, and then we have a tracking system.
Why do we write down the score?
So, hey, on March 23rd, 2021, I did this, here, I'm here. Now I'm comparing what I did to that.
Do you know the CrossFit workout, Karen?
Yes, I'm drawing a blank right now, 21:15.9 though.
150 wall balls for time.
Okay. Which one am I thinking of, 21:59?
There's a lot of them.
Yeah,
Fran,
there you go.
or Elizabeth, or Aaron. But anyways, so Karen, 150 wall balls for time. So if I do Karen, and my first time is 20 minutes to do 150 wall balls, because I've never done CrossFit before, and then all of a sudden in a month I do it again and I get 5 minutes. What does that tell you about my fitness?
Assuming that it was the same movement standards and you didn't modify and do a push press, it shows that you've gotten better at wall balls.
Yeah. But if I didn't have a movement standard and I could do a push press and there wasn't a standard, it's okay, just do 150 wall balls, and the wall balls look like this, and maybe I just went eye level, not all the way up to the line, because we don't have the standard. What would that tell you about my fitness?
Are you moving? Yes, but are you growing? I don't.
We don't know, because
We don't know.
the standard's different. It doesn't tell us anything, because it's not anything you can't compare it. It's apples to oranges, right? So that's why another reason it's important to have a standard is that we can measure. CrossFit is big about measuring and tracking and testing, right? So that's a main reason why too. And then here's the other thing is another reason. It's on the one hand, it doesn't need to be the main reason necessarily, but how would you feel if you and me were doing Karen together, and you and me kind of go off of each other's numbers when we're in class, oh, what did Steven do today, right? Oh, Steven got this, I'm gonna shoot for this. But then when we were in class together and we were doing it, I was doing the push press, not squatting all the way and not touching line all the way. How do you feel as another member next to me watching me do that while you're doing it to the standard?
So for the board, you kind of usually knowing the members, you know what level they're going to be doing usually. So comparatively, you know that most likely, for instance, I'll usually compare with Ryan on a lot of stuff. I know the movements he's doing. But if it's a member I know that is probably modifying, I know Kevin's going to modify a little bit more on a lot of things. So.
And not my question though. My question is, I'm marking RX in the workout. You and me are like you and Ryan. I'm in class with you one day, and we're doing the same workout that I beat you by a minute or two in, right? Let's say it's Karen.
Yeah.
Because we're staying on Karen. You get 6 minutes, I get 4 minutes, and then we do it again a couple months later, because I'm programming Karen a lot, and you see me do it, and I beat you again, but you see me doing wall-to-wall push press, not squatting all the way, not getting all the way up. How do you feel? How does that make you feel?
I would not feel bad because I know you weren't doing the full movement.
But what if I was marking and I was doing the full movement?
I would know you weren't, so it wouldn't bother me too much. But if it was for like the open, it's like, oh, here's the CrossFit Nevada leaderboard. I'd be like, yeah, you didn't go all the way down on it, but you still marked it.
Yeah. One of the things is like, in theory, this shouldn't bother anyone because like, who cares? Because I'm not getting as fit as you. You're getting fitter than me because you're holding yourself to the standard. But for camaraderie and community, it can. And the thing to consider is, while you and me are probably like, okay, you're just cheating yourself. Like, we have like 70 members, right? And so like, some of them are not as like aware or reflective, and they're just like, why does this guy have to do it? Like, or why doesn't he have to do it? If he doesn't have to do it, why should I do it? Right? And so like, that's the other thing is, for continuity and consistency, if we're telling one person to do it, we should hold everyone to that standard. And if they're not able to do it, then we hold them to as close to it as they can get, and we try to progress them towards it. Because like you said, it's something to get to if not everyone can get there. And both things can be true. Both things can be true in that we work with all kinds of people and we help them wherever they are. And as much as we can, we also move them towards that standard. Those can be true at the same time, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, it takes me back to my first box, and we had like a 18-year-old who always had to be first on there, and but we all knew him as he always cuts his reps,
Yeah.
Like Tyler. So it's always like, yeah, you're always first, great, but you cut your reps all the time on it, so I don't know if we feel as close to you as well.
Yeah.
Just because you're a rep cutter. Cheating yourself, yes, but you're talking a big game, but we know that you're not.
Totally. And then also like, yeah, like here's the other part is like, one of the things I was thinking about this morning is like, when you have that member in your class that's doing that, and they're just always doing that, and like you're annoyed by them, and you're like, yeah, you don't realize you're not actually doing a rep. That's your fault as a coach, because you allow that, right? You allow that to be the standard. That becomes the standard. It's like, Steven doesn't care, so like, why does it matter what I do? Like, oh, they're not doing it. Like, and then it kind of makes like, thereby when you go try to correct someone else, it kind of makes your correction bullshit, right? Because you're like, well, he's telling me to do that, but he's not telling that person, so like, clearly it doesn't matter that much, right? Even if it's not conscious, right? Even if they're not saying that's bullshit, they're like, yeah, right? And so it just waters down everything that we do. And so that's why it's really important to be consistent with holding the standard. Now the fun part is like, well, next question is like, what are some of the standards? So I want to talk about that. We would have demonstrated ideally if we had people, but I think we could just talk about it. But where does a push-up begin and end?
That's what I was just thinking about right now. It's weird. It starts from the plank position. Well, I mean, you're standing and you go to plank.
Plank, starts in plank.
Yeah, then you all the way down, chest, legs, touch, and then all the way up, and you're supposed to be flexing right here, the shoulder blades popping upward.
Sure, retraction.
Yeah, we do have a lot of people who don't always go all the way down and snake it too, especially when you get tired. It's not always extension with the arms, but yeah, all the way down, all the way up.
Yeah. Now, in the middle of the push-up, should you rest on the ground?
I was always told no.
No, it's not a real
even
push-up.
with a burpee, no either.
Yeah, like,
you rest at the top.
yeah, with the burpee, I feel like the burpee is a little different. I feel like you can rest at the bottom more with that, but yeah, I don't know, like it depends. It depends on the context. If you're doing a strict burpee, you definitely don't want to rest on the bottom. In a strict push-up, you definitely don't want to rest at the bottom. Now, if you're doing a shit ton of burpees, sometimes you might rest at the bottom, but that's fair. That's a good nuance. But since Sam's here, Sam could be our demonstration person if he wants to be.
Where you been, Sam?
I don't consent to being on camera.
Actually,
No, it's fine.
he did sign a release, so there's that. He signed informed consent page. Yeah.
Where you been, Sam? I just finished White Lotus. I didn't have anything to talk to about it.
I was gonna be here yesterday, but I found out on Thursday afternoon that I had to open the job site, so I had to be at work at 6.
So, Sam, can you show us the top of the push-up? And then can you show us the finish of a push-up? Ah, he got the trick question. Everyone.
Wow,
Sam,
I was waiting for you to go down.
everyone, Sam, he didn't move. He was in a plank position. That's good, Sam. We won't make you demo too much. All right. So that's a big one, right? There's a lot of people who do push-ups, and so in my 9 a.m. class, I kind of made it a point recently to be like, hey guys, this is where a push-up starts. This is where a push-up ends. This is not a push-up. You guys get tired sometimes, and that's what it turns into. But understand that when you're doing that, you're not building strength towards the push-up because you're losing the eccentric portion of the eccentric. You're losing a lot of the lowering because you're just relaxing at the bottom and not using attention to pop back up.
What if you're doing a hand release push-up?
That's a different push-up.
Because you could theoretically just rest at the bottom because you're down there.
Yeah, theoretically, yes. And that's why sometimes people say the hand release push-up is easier than a strict push-up. That's also why I programmed 1 1/4 push-ups a couple weeks ago, saying you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's fine if you do a hand release push-up if that's what you're doing. But if you're doing a hand release push-up when you're supposed to be doing a strict push-up, then you're not really hitting the standard, right? And so, like, what are the common, like, what I thought we could role play real quick is, because this is practical, right? Is like, what are some of the common objections to correcting form? So let's pretend that I'm a client who is doing relaxing at the bottom and then pushing up. And then you try to correct me. Ready?
So, Michael, you were resting at the bottom of the push-up.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
So a push-up is to full range of motion. So you're in the plank, you're going all the way down, and then you're pushing yourself up. So
Why?
to build upper body strength, and when you rest at the bottom of a movement, you got that keyword rest. So this is supposed to be one cohesive movement down and up.
So you're not allowed to rest there?
You're allowed to rest, but with everything, you rest at the full completion of the movement. So you're only performing half the movement here.
You're doing good so far. Keep going. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is the movement standard. So resting during a movement.
Two things. One. Try to say less words. Try to just tell me what to do, short and actionably.
Okay, the full movement. You go down, this hits, you go back up. That's the movement. That's one.
Yeah, but what happens when you get tired?
When you get tired, you rest after the completion. Unless you're going to failure, you're not going to failure right now. So if you go to failure and you totally
You don't need
eat
to
it,
say go to failure because they're not going to failure. So just
Okay.
leave that. Part of coaching maturity is like leaving stuff out, right?
Okay.
Like trying to not like if you're not like they're not going to failure, you don't need to mention that failure, right?
Okay. So yes, this is the movement. Full range motion, then you go back up. If you're tired, you rest after you complete the movement.
Yeah,
Because
but
we're going for 4 reps, not 1.5 reps.
But I can only do like 2 of these, and there's like 100.
Okay, so if you can only do 2, we'll modify the movement to something where you could do the rest of the 98.
Right? So yeah, so that was perfect. Every reason was good. You hit a reason, right? Like that's the thing is you're gonna get objections. You're gonna get people and like it's really easy to shut down, go inside and be like, oh, like they don't want to do it, so I'm not gonna do it. But you gotta communicate to them in a way that helps them get what they need out of it that day. So if they can't do more than 2 and there's 100, they definitely need a modification. What I would say overall, just in the interaction, I know we're just role playing, but like I want you to focus this next week on when you coach and you give cues, try to make them as short and direct as possible. So like, what I would have said instead of let's find a modification is, how about we try an incline push-up on the bar, right? Like, or, cool, let's go to an ab mount, right? Like, but then that way it's like you're giving them something, you're thinking about like, okay, they can't do this, but they could do it, like, if you know them, really if you know them, you're like, okay, Sam can do incline push-ups all day, so this is too hard. Let's try this in between. How's that feel? Cool? Cool. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Any other questions or thoughts on the standard?
I'm thinking back to the games and how there are some standards on there. And, yeah, there were, I mean, sometimes I was thinking of like the wall walks, you know, past a certain line. So, that's how CrossFit wants it, but let's just say you don't go all the way. You're still doing the wall walk, but if you're like a centimeter off, is it?
So, it depends. Who is doing that? Who is a centimeter off?
Oh, so I know I was a couple times I got no rep. So it was like, okay, well, I didn't go all the way, so you're basically right there, but
Yeah, but I'm saying, who is doing it? Where are you at in class?
like during the open, so like it says you gotta be.
During the open, there's open standards.
Yes, so
You gotta
open
hold
standards.
standards.
So yeah,
If they're doing reps, you gotta hold them to that. That's another.
okay.
Now, in class, in training each day, there is no reps, right? I mean, there is no reps, but you don't walk up to a client and say, that's a no rep in the middle of class, because it's not the games, it's not the open, right? Different situation. But what is true is if they're doing level 3 and they're an advanced athlete,
Dynamic, it's probably not something I would say to my mom.
they should be held to the standard because they're an advanced athlete. And so if they're like, let's say Elliot, or let's say David likes to do level 3 too sometimes, and they're doing a wall walk, and they're going fast, and they're getting after it, and you got an 8-minute workout, but they're not touching every time, then you need to tell them to touch, right? And again, instead of like, hey David, well the standard is, it needs to be like, touch your nose to the wall. Go ahead and lay down all the way to push it, right? It needs to be short, quick. So the other thing is, like in the middle of the workout, no one really has time to hear all of that, right?
They like to play together.
And now, what if it's Jenny, and Jenny hasn't been upside down in a long time, and she's nervous about wall walks, and
Don't be nervous.
and you've told her the standard, right? But she can't go up all the way without getting scared, right? So is it okay for her to be a centimeter away from the wall?
No.
Yeah, it is. Cause she's.
I mean,
scared.
yes, there is. Sorry, I was thinking of her face being
That's okay.
close.
Yeah.
No, I don't want her that close.
Yeah. So
But yeah, from the hand-wise, it's okay if she doesn't get there.
that's the standard for her that day, right? So like the standard, there's a gold standard, like we said, and then there's a gold standard for each person that day. And the goal is to get everyone to that gold standard over time, but that day, you might get them 5 inches away from that standard, right? When it becomes a problem is if like they don't ever move towards the gold standard because you assume that they don't want to be coached towards it, right? You gotta find how to coach them. That's the fun in coaching, that's the coaching challenge, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now what happens when I hold the standard, you hold the standard, and then 2 other coaches don't hold the standard?
Confusion?
Confusion. Yeah, confusion as an athlete, confusion as a community, confusion
Favoritism.
culturally.
Favoritism, of which coach you like and which classes you go to because they're teaching.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Hopefully you go to the hard ones.
I don't have favoritism. Just so you know, Steven, that's not why I have.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, you've been skipping Fridays. That's
Alright.
how it is.
Any other questions or thoughts on that?
No, it's helpful for sure. Yeah, it just made me think of something when it comes to, if you let one slide, and I think we're all been guilty of that, like, yeah, other athletes can see, hey, this one's not doing it, so why should I?
Yeah.
I think we sometimes do it after a while, like, not everyone, like, you might cue someone 18,000 times and they still do it.
Well, if you're queuing them 18,000 times and they're still doing it, you haven't found the cue that's broken through us yet. You haven't cued them in a way that they understood it. And yes, you could be saying all the right words, and yes, you could be showing them lots of different ways, but you haven't showed them the way, or you haven't. Here's the other thing is, like we talked about last week with teaching, whatever you're teaching should be relatable to their life, right? And so if you're telling them, yeah, the movement standard, the CrossFit sets, the game sets, most people aren't going to respond to that because they don't care about the movement standard, the CrossFit games, the open, they don't care about that. But if you tell them that you're never going to get upper body strength and you're always complaining about how weak you are in your upper body, they might connect with that and they might want to do it. I was so happened with one of my people in my 9
Yeah, that's probably, I was thinking also, like 515, or like Ryan Gray, like he's super competitive, but he doesn't always like, I'll go, hey, all the way up on the push-ups, I'll start doing it, but then I'll get back and do like half push-ups.
So I would tell them, that's not a full push-up. You're not going to get as strong as you can. And what really fun, which I'll probably start off my Saturday night routine this way, but a couple weeks ago we got wall balls, and I know a lot of my 9 a.m. runners, it turns into a push press, and they all have pretty good squats. That's all right, guys, let's go against the wall. Go ahead and show me the bottom of the wall ball. Cool. Go ahead and show me the top. Make sure you hit a line that is the top, not just telling it randomly. Cool. Go ahead and go back down to the bottom again. Yeah, everyone can hit the bottom, so why does it turn into a push press? That's how I started off. And then what I close with is, what happens if you get a high score today with the wall balls and you end up doing a push press? And I said, I don't know, what happens? I said, you don't deserve that score because it's not a real score. And they were like, oh! And I was like, yeah, that's real. Guess what? Since then, my class does good wall balls. I walk around. If they're starting to get a little close, when I walk around, they go down, right? That's because following the standard. That's because of saying what the standard is and saying it in different ways why it should matter to them. Yeah. So yeah, for the score people, the people who get after a score, if they care about the score, they care about the score. You should use that to your advantage and be like, you care about the score, so if you really want the score to mean something, then you should do the standard. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
And then, there's the movement standard versus the personal standard. Like, one would do better because it's the standard, and one would do better because the only person you're cheating is
Don't
yourself.
remember if you're gonna do that, we're gonna tuck the other stuff away.
Like, that
And it's
was
funny
me
because
very
we know that too, right? But like we're just like, oh, yeah, they're only cheating themselves. But we just think it. We should say it out loud just so that they. It's a reminder because people forget. People have lives outside of CrossFit, believe it or not. So it's nice to hear those things.
It's like whenever any of my friends have negative self-talk, it's like I don't let anyone talk to my friends about like that, including you.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing for the movement standard.
They all need
Your friends are
reminders.
jerks.
Even Peter needs reminders from time to time.
Peter's friends.